power-hungry homes and businesses are driving demand for electricity across the country. Keeping up with that appetite is a practical and economic necessity. The Prime Minister says growing the grid is critical. Mark Carney wants to double capacity, and he's launched a new initiative to get it done.
Electricity demand in Canada is expected to double by 2050. So we will double our grid. That's the headline. Canada will double its electricity generation over the course of the next 2 decades. Because the path to affordability is electrification. The path to competitiveness is electrification. The path to net zero is electrification. Electrification underpins everything.
The CBC's Karina Roman is on the story. She joins us live from our Ottawa bureau. So Karina, break down this new strategy for us.
Well, according to the government, there are 4 pillars that it's based on. The first one being that the infrastructure needs to be built. So there'll have to be major investments in generation, transmission, distribution, storage, and they estimate that that's looking like $1 trillion over the next 2 decades, but there's no detail in this strategy yet on how much of that money would come from the federal government, the provinces, territories, private sector, ratepayers. So that's just the general premise of Pillar 1. Pillar 2 is to connect the grids. Right now, our grid system is quite fragmented. We want to be better connected, the Prime Minister says, east, west, and north. The third pillar is training skilled workers, the ones we need to actually build this grid. And the fourth pillar is to grow Canada's domestic manufacturing capacity for the components that we need to build this grid. Now, the Prime Minister also talked about a focus on affordability, that this has to be done, even if they're talking about $1 trillion, that it means not focusing on what he called the purity of the kind of fuel generation that would go into this electricity generation. And that means natural gas. So natural gas is still a part of this strategy. Even though it's a fossil fuel, it will play a role, especially in some provinces. We're talking Alberta, Saskatchewan. Prime Minister Mark Carney says, though, that this is not about diluting values or reversing course on climate action. Have a listen.
We're focused on practical steps that are going to get results. It doesn't do us good to be sitting in court all the time with provinces. It doesn't do us good to be talking past each other. What it does do us good is to come together, specific projects. You know, in the end, these aren't words on a page, and the government is putting more focus on the actions, really rolling up the sleeves and making sure these are moving forward.
So this is a higher level strategy at this point. So there aren't a lot of details, and not surprisingly, that's not the only part that Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre doesn't like. He put out a statement on X where he talked about that really this announcement is all about sticking with policies that he says don't work, anti-development laws, the industrial carbon tax, infrastructure bank, tax credits that they're continuing with that he says, you know, businesses don't use. And as he said, also more consultations and talk about doing something someday. Now, it is a strategy that involves 4 months of consultations with the provinces, territories, unions, utilities on how to actually accomplish the goal, especially the connection of the grids. Prime Minister Mark Carney says if it's done right, it'll save Canadians, most households, a lot more money. It'll save them more money, cost them a lot less money in terms of their total energy costs by 2050. And if done right, the cost can be spread out. Of course, the key word in that, or the key words in that, is if it's done right.
And so what does this mean for Canada's emissions targets?
So Mark Carney was asked about that, and he sidestepped that question, talking about being pragmatic and practical. Compromises are necessary in the short term, in terms of, let's say, natural gas, to get to the long-term goal of lowering emissions. It is interesting that this consultation will include a review of the clean electricity regulations that were put out in 2024. The Prime Minister preparing Canadians for, as he called them, adjustments to those regulations that will come eventually, saying that different provinces have different electricity markets, they're starting from different positions, and that that the current regulations would inhibit what his goal and his government's goal is with the electricity grid in terms of doubling it in size. So yes, this pragmatism is what we've heard from him before, but it is alarming for some. Have a listen.
So this strategy is the beginning of the end of the clean electricity regulations, a foundational piece of climate policy and one of the last climate policies this federal government hasn't already gutted or abandoned. The clean electricity regulations would save billions in healthcare costs, would reduce more than 180 million tons of carbon emissions, and it's being signaled that these are going to be weakened into nothingness.
Now, Tom has also talked about how tomorrow's announcement that we're expecting from the Prime Minister alongside Alberta Premier Danielle Smith about carbon pricing and a new mechanism and price level that the province and Ottawa has agreed on going forward as a prerequisite for a pipeline, that is further dismantling of climate policies that he feels are key, and many environmental groups feel are key to actually getting our emissions down. But all eyes are on tomorrow and that announcement to see what is actually agreed upon, how much that advances the prospects of an oil pipeline to Tidewater, and whether there's any other things about that agreement and announcement that we haven't gotten wind of yet.
We will be watching with a keen eye tomorrow. Karina, thank you. The CBC's Karina Roman live in Ottawa.